If you're new to our channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.
Now back to the Wisconsin Vegetable Garden Radio Show with your hosts, Joey and Holly Baird.
Well, we don't have to go to the Ivy Organics 3-in-1 Plant Guard hotline because our guest is sitting right in the studio. Holly Baird is a multi-award-winning Wisconsin State Fair canner who didn't start canning as some may think when she was a child, but later gathered the information in life. Welcome to the program, Holly.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Many people think that you have to learn how to can at a young age, and many people who have heard the stories about canners have heard that, I started it when I was 6 years old with my grandmother or my mom. You have a different story to tell of when you learned how to can.
That's correct. So I'm a city girl, and I thought canning was for country people. So that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Like, you don't can, we go to the store.
You never canned in your life.
Oh, heck no.
No. Because, and talk about your upbringing.
That wasn't necessary. We had a very small garden in my backyard, and in our backyard growing up, and we did have a compost pile. But we didn't can. We would eat the stuff that came out of the garden. We would bake with it, make whatever foods with it. But if canned goods, came from the shelf on the local store. So fast forward to meeting you, and then probably about, I think 8 or 9 years ago, we had this garden that just started to be prolific. We had tons of tomatoes, tons of cucumbers. You and I went strawberry picking, and we had all this produce, and I said, what are we going to do with this produce? And you told me that we were going to can it, and I said, good luck with that. Let me know how that works out for you. And then you taught me some things. We got a book and stuff, and we went to the store and got some canning supplies, and then soon it became kind of a very productive hobby for me. I took some classes through the local rec department, and then I went on to win some awards at the State Fair. Now,
what are some important things that we need to remember when we're canning?
I think the biggest thing is that canning is a science. A lot of people say if you can cook, you can can, but I think if you can bake, you can because baking is a science. If you don't bake your cake properly,
it turns out to a brownie. It's a brownie.
Yeah, to a brownie.
Yeah.
Or your cookies are going to run all over the place or whatever. So it's a science. Baking is a science. Canning is a science. So if you can bake, you can can. I mean, if you can cook, you can, but you have to just make sure you're following a recipe. You're following the recipe exactly.
Well, let's talk about the recipes. Can one use an old recipe or that's laying around, or they find on the website, or it's my great-grandmother's, whatever? Can they use that to can tomatoes or pickles or whatever the case is?
So
or what's the guidelines?
Yeah. You want to use something that's been published within the last 10 to 15 years. So things have changed. Food science has changed. The makeup of our food has changed.
The depletion of certain items.
That's correct. So you want to use something that's been published, within the last 10 to 15 years. I'll give you some good resources at the end here. But you want to use something that's been published the last 15 years. Say you do have Grandma's spaghetti sauce recipe and you want to can it. You can look at recipes and you can probably find something very similar. There's a lot of spaghetti sauce recipes out there. There's a lot of XYZ. If it seems unsafe to can it, if you're like, I don't know if I should can this beer, bacon, maple jelly, it's probably unsafe to can. If you think about canning, you want to think about you're canning what essentially is the whole food ingredient. So instead of canning something like beer, bacon, jelly, maybe you want to can.
Is there such thing as beer, bacon?
There is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it safe to can though?
No.
Okay.
So, so you want to think about that kind of stuff. If you are unsure, there's a lot of good resources out there. The biggest thing is that canning is a science. You need to be safe. Botulism still exists. There was a case about 5 years ago for people in Colorado who actually died from botulism. So you want to keep that in mind, that there's good and bad things in your soil. Those things can come into your jars. That's why it's good to be safe.
And when you say it's a science, there's a certain procedure in which one has to follow at a certain time frame and temperature and ingredients in order to make sure that those bad bacteria doesn't exist inside the food in which you're preserving that is going to be shelf stable for a number of months, and eventually you are going to consume.
Another thing is that no matter how experienced you are in canning, cooking, whatever, you always want to read the recipe ahead of time when you can. There's things that require soaking for 24 hours or 3 hours or whatever. If you start a project at 8 p.m. or you need to soak it for 3 hours and you need to be up for work the next day, you are not going to be a happy canner.
And you can't just go, I'll stop it now, I'll go to work, I'll come back. That's what we're talking about. You're talking about it has to be a boom, boom, boom procedure. It just can't be, I'll do a little bit on Tuesday, some on Thursday, finish it up on Saturday.
Right. So time is of the essence when it comes to canning. It's a matter of just making sure that you are being safe and also having the proper ingredients on hand. You can't always just substitute something for something.
Can you substitute anything?
Not really. No. The reason why these recipes are tested and safe is because that's how you need to follow them.
What kind of jars is required? What can or can't we use when it comes to this? Or
Sure.
what is recommended?
So you want to use mason jars or canning jars, and these jars are made to withstand being reused. They're made to withstand the heat of canning, the pressure, if you use pressure canning, the pressure of canning. If they're mason jars, they usually say mason on them. You'll see other brand names like Ball or Kerr on them. Older ones will say typically mason on them. You can tell a mason jar from just like an old peanut butter or mayonnaise jar.
What would you say is the easiest thing to can?
I think probably anything tomato-based. If you want to just make salsa or can home tomatoes or pasta sauce, all of those things are pretty simple because tomatoes are high in acid as is, so it's pretty safe. Anything with pickles, cucumbers is pretty easy, but you just have to make sure you're working quickly. So something like if you're making pasta, you have to let it cook. Pasta sauce, you have to let it cook down for a while, so that gives you time to do other things. You don't have to feel rushed. Something like jam, people think, oh, you can jam fast, that's easy, it's just jam. But jam, you have to work quickly, and you have to make sure you're doing it correctly as you do need it to set. Otherwise, you end up with syrup.
Well, there's water bath canning, there's pressure canning, and then there's refrigerator canning. Can you touch on a little bit of all three of those? And there's some people that do not choose to water bath or pressure can, but they want to can, so they refrigerator can.
Right. So refrigerating canning is basically you're doing the same steps as canning, but you're gonna, instead of making it shelf stable, you're just gonna put it in your fridge. Same thing for freezer.
Refrigerator. What are we looking time frame? What compared
Couple
to
months.
Okay, compared to a shelf stable, which is.
Ideally, you want to, anything you can, you want to eat it within a year. Doesn't mean that when it reaches that year mark that it's going to turn bad and explode. It's just that if you are canning, you want to keep that in mind, how much you're canning versus how much you're actually consuming.
What are some good resources in which one can get a baseline for the canning procedures?
Sure. So one of them is through Ball Canning, which is freshpreserving.com. Ball Canning is the one who makes the jars. They have the Ball Blue Book, which is a very good book.
500 plus recipes.
Yeah, great information. You can get that at a local hardware store, some local retailers. It's like $7. If you're paying more than $7 or $8 for that, you're paying too much. You can find resources at your library. Better Homes and Gardens has good recipes for can I can this type questions. The National Center for Home Food Preservation has really great information. And then also you can check out your local master canner if there is one.
When we talk about that type of the ball book, it's not just a recipe book. There is other information that is in that book that can help the kid.
Yeah, there's recipes, there's step-by-step instructions.
There's nice pictures.
Same thing with Better Homes and Gardens. I start with their book called You Can, and it's got step-by-step instructions. It's really helpful. So if you look through a canning book and you're like, I don't need a bunch of recipes, I want like the visual, definitely look for that as well.
And that's basically self-canning 101. Anything else that people need to know before they just decide to... the freshness of the produce is key, is it not?
Yeah, definitely. So especially something like if you're trying to make cucumber pickles, fresh cucumbers, you want to harvest them when they're small and definitely want to work quickly. So freshness of produce is what is key for everything.
So that's just a little bit about how you can have and perform safe canning in your home. And it always works if you have a friend to help you out, to go along with it, or find somebody who's experienced that can teach you as well.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.